All right, everybody, if I can please have your attention, that is our second bell. Before we have our Pledge of Allegiance today, I would like to have a moment of silence and remember past President Ken Keene, who passed away last week. When we celebrated our centennial anniversary in 2013, we wrote this about the Keene family. Keene is a name found all over the Rotary archives, with 4 generations represented. Keenes have served many roles within the club, with Ken Keene serving as president in 1971 to 1972. They were world travelers who knew the value of Rotary and visited clubs around the world. One family member said, "Rotary is a way of life in the Keene family." Please let us take a moment of silence for Ken and his family. Thank you, and our best wishes go out to Ken and his family. Let's please stand in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, please welcome Ann Wall, who practices real estate, construction, finance law at Von Briesen and Roper, to give our invocation.
As we gather here today as Rotary members, we pray that we are ever mindful of opportunities to render our service to fellow citizens and to our community. Keeping in mind always the enduring values of life, exerting our efforts in those areas and on those things upon which future generations can build with confidence. Let us continue to strive to make the world a better place. Amen.
Thank you, Ann. I'd also like to thank all of our sponsors whose logos ran on the presentation before the program. If you're interested in having your company's logo or a short video appear as part of the program, please contact Mary. I'd like to welcome our virtual audience, and I'd also like to welcome a good number of guests we have in attendance here today. When I call your name, please stand. Tim Carr, a visiting Rotarian from Mequon-Thiensville Rotary. Judge Jeffrey Wagner. Charlie Stahl from Stahl Realty Group. Ambrose Wilson Brown from the International Association for Human Values. Elizabeth Gunther from West Dallas Memorial Hospital. Jason Gonzalez from Fourth Dimension. And Athena Anderson, daughter of Teresa Esser and her friend Maydine Balad. Thank you all. We're welcome. We're happy to have you at Rotary today, and welcome. Today, we're very excited to hear from our guest speaker, Geeta Sankappanavar. But before we get into the program, we've got some club business to take care of. Done in a day. First, let's welcome Sister Edna Longoran, President of St. Anne Center for Intergenerational Care, as she gives us an update regarding a Done in a Day volunteer opportunity.
Thank you, Todd. Good afternoon, everyone. You've probably heard about Done in a Day, which goes around the community and helps out with particularly nonprofit organizations. Well, we have one set up for September 4th from 9 to 12, and you have this all on your tables. And it's at St. Anne Center for Intergenerational Care. And I don't know if you know that we have a Northside campus, 2415 West North Avenue, and it's kind of a food desert. And so St. Anne's decided to raise vegetables and fruit, and we have 27 garden boxes that are now flourishing and needs lots of help. So if you can help us harvest, we'd really love to have you. We will supply the gloves and the insect repellent. You're going to need that. And we will have fun harvesting and preparing vegetables for picking making sauces, and so forth. So please wear comfortable shoes, old clothes, and hopefully weather will be fine. Otherwise, we'll move indoors. Thank you very much. Hope to see you there.
Thank you, Sister Edna. I'd like to welcome Mary up to give some updates on the Scholarship Golf Classic.
Hello and thank you. You know, there was one guest who I didn't see come in, and that's Fred Chambers, who's over there. So welcome, Fred. Sorry we didn't have you on the list. And I'm here today because our golf committee chairs, Patrick Fennelly and John Ferguson, couldn't be here. But I want to tell you that we are gearing up for the take 2 of the RCM Scholarship Golf Classic that was rained out in June. And we had so much fun planning the first one that we're going to do a second one. So here we go. And first, I want to say thank you to everyone who golfed or came out to have a drink with us afterward. Your generosity was very inspiring and very much appreciated by our scholarship students. We introduced you to the 7 new scholarships virtually last week, and they are joining the 14 continuing scholars. So we have 21 students that we're supporting this year. So it's very important, and thank you very much. We have a bit of news about September 13th. Most of the golfers are returning, so we really aren't looking for golfers. And we are actually have, it's going to start a little earlier. We're going to have a short reception after golf in the middle of the afternoon. So we won't be having a redo of the reception in the evening. But unfortunately, even with it cut back a bit with a second event, there's always more expenses. So we're hoping to defray some of those expenses with a really fun, scaled back, but fun silent auction. We already have some great items, like for example, we have 2 tickets and lodging for the 2022 PGA tournament in Tulsa, Oklahoma next May. The value of that is nearly $2,500. We have tickets for the Marcus Center for the Performing Arts, for the Rep, for the Symphony. We have a fabulous wine basket and pickleball lessons for 6. We'd also like to put together a whiskey basket, and we're hoping that some of you will want to contribute a bottle of whiskey to that basket. We're looking for whiskey that's a value of $40 or more. And of course, if there's anything that you can think of for a ticket, some tickets, some experiences, some gift cards, all donations are greatly appreciated. And finally, I would be remiss not to say that we still have some sponsorships available. One that's kind of fun is the Bloody Mary bar, which we have discounted to $750. So please think about that. So again, thank you for your generosity. Thank you for all you do. And, you know, Rotary now more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Just a quick reminder for everybody, if you have not completed your like-minded initial profile, it is available in an email that was sent out by the Rotary office this morning. I think we as a club are very fortunate to be a pilot for this tool. It's at our disposal, and I think it's going to be a great way to really help continue to connect Rotary and the Rotarians here in Milwaukee. One final reminder before we get onto the program, as you guys are exiting the parking lot today, just remember both right lanes or both exit lanes. You put the ticket they gave you on the way in first, followed by the ticket that everybody has on their tables as the official exit ticket. So go ahead, grab one of those now, put it in a pocket. Don't find yourself down there without it to get out. So with that, please welcome Teresa Esser, Managing Director of Silicon Pastures, to introduce our speaker.
Well, thank you. I want to start out with a little vocabulary lesson, very, very small. I want to make sure that you guys all know what ESG means. ESG stands for environmental, social, and corporate governance. ESG, environmental, social, corporate governance. It's a new word that's floating around the financial sector, and you may come in contact with it. So now I want to introduce our speaker. I met Geeta Sankappanavar when I was a sophomore in college and she was a freshman. We met during fall rush. She was rushing my house and I gave her a bid. Later, we became suite mates and we shared an apartment after graduation. Geeta has done many amazing things during her career. She raised $1 billion fund and 2 of her portfolio companies have gone public. She started to invest in renewable energy, and she has served as a source of inspiration for countless women around the world who ask, can I do this? Can I raise money? Can I build a business? Can I achieve my dreams? I'm standing before you today as a representative of Rotary's Invest in Milwaukee committee. And when we started our committee, we thought, wouldn't it be great if we could raise a venture capital fund? Let's raise a venture capital fund and invest in the people of Milwaukee. We thought to ourselves, hey, somewhere in Milwaukee, there's probably someone with the brains and the charisma to become the next Steve Jobs. All we need to do is find that person and point some venture capital in their general direction, and then they can just start a company out of their parents' garage, and we'll come along and discover them, and we'll all live happily ever after. So then we thought, well, hey, Steve Jobs started a company in his parents' garage, and lucky for him, his parents had a garage for him to start his company in. Then we learned that his father was a veteran, and he had probably benefited from the GI Bill and maybe even some other forms of government assistance related to buying a house. And then we looked at these statistics for Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we said, well, actually, in our city, the home ownership rate is pretty low, especially in communities of color. So if we did find someone with the brains and the charisma to be the next Steve Jobs, and they happened to be a member of a community of color, chances are that their parents would not own either a house or a garage. And if they happened to start a company in the half of the garage that they sort of partially got access to because of their relationship with the landlord or by kicking out the other tenants, then they might not be able to actually keep the business going if they got evicted from their rented apartment, which unfortunately happens all too often. And by the way, I'm not even sure that this person's parents would have a bank account or a credit score or any of the building blocks that they might need to take out a mortgage to buy a house in the first place. So then we said venture capital? Yeah. Angel capital? Yeah. How about bank accounts? How about beginning at the beginning? How about beginning with trust building? How about we set up some kind of partnership with the Rotary Club of Milwaukee and some kind of financial institution that was designed with social impact in mind? How about we start out by listening to our community to find out what they actually need? Geeta Sankappanavar is going to tell you about an organization called ESG Financial, Inc. And later, we're going to talk about a partnership between ESG Financial, Inc. and the Rotary Club of Milwaukee. But not today. Today, we're going to give you a sneak peek. Do you want to know why? We can't give you the details of this partnership today because today, we're not done listening.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Really, really appreciate it. I've had the opportunity to spend a little time with some of you, predominantly the Invest Milwaukee Committee, and I've really enjoyed it. You guys are possibilities thinkers, and it has been a real honor and a privilege to spend some time with you. I'm going to start by first telling you about a case study. It's a case study that was given to all Harvard Business School students. It's called the Heidi Resin case study. Just to confirm, have any of you heard of it? If you have, just raise your hand. If you haven't, I'll continue. Okay, good. So this case study was basically about a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, which they codenamed Heidi Resin. She started a company in Silicon Valley. She then leveraged her Rolodex to become a VC at a major military industrial venture capital firm. Standard Harvard Business School case study was written about her, And what they did is they then took that study and they gave it to a whole bunch of Harvard Business School students. Except they only gave it to about half of the students. To the other half of the students, they did one search and replace for the name Heidi for Howard. They did one search and replace for the pronoun he, she for he. And so half the students got the Heidi case study and the other half got the Howard. And what happened? Well, the positive thing is both Heidi and Howard were considered to be equally competent. But after that, Howard was a great guy. He was a great leader of people. He was somebody you wanted to spend time with. If you could spend 4 hours on the golf course with Howard, you took it. Heidi, not so much. She was a loner. She was out for herself. She was not a great leader of people, and probably not a good person to hang out with. This was the first seminal study on unconscious bias in the workplace, where the stereotypes that we're raised with are the stereotypes that we go and we bring into the workplace, into the educational forum, and further on throughout our lives. This is the first case study that showed that power and success are positively correlated with likability in men and are negatively correlated with likability in women. I'm going to repeat. Power and success are positively correlated with likability in men and are negatively correlated with likability in women. This study has now been replicated not just with gender-based distinguishing characteristics, but also with color. And it holds true whether it's color, gender, ethnicity, anything that makes us different from the majority. And why is this important? It's important because as a leader, as a business leader, as somebody who's going out to get hired for a first job, to get capital for the first business that they want to start, to get a loan to buy a home, who you are, where you come from, what you look like matters. This is unconscious bias. And so this has been, I just want to share this anecdote with you because it is important to understand that when we are setting the objective standards to hire people, to promote them, to give them loans, to give them mortgages, to support them in our community, give them scholarships, there is still subjectivity and unconscious bias in how we think about approaching people. So I'm going to tell you today a little bit about my career trajectory, what I have done. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself personally, my why I'm doing what I'm doing today. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about ESG Financial, a social impact fintech that is working to build a more sustainable, inclusive, and just world for all. My story, I met Teresa when I was 17 years old, before I had even learned how to wear lipstick. And 25 years plus later, we built a great friendship and partnership that has spanned decades. I started my career after graduation by working for a management consulting firm called McKinsey out of the New York office. I spent 2 years there, and then I'm fundamentally an entrepreneur and a business builder. So I left to start my first company. I was backed by SoftBank, one of the first few women to be backed by them. And a couple of years later, we sold that business. And then I started my second company. My second company was acquired by a firm called Cambridge Solutions. Cambridge was a private equity owner-operated financial services firm focused on risk transactions in insurance and banking. We were led by a gentleman named Chris Sinclair. Chris was the former CEO of Pepsi. And he actually was the gentleman who hired Indra Nooyi into Pepsi, who was one of the first women and minorities to ever become a CEO of a Fortune 100 company. So at Cambridge, I was responsible for strategic global outsourcing. My job was to help grow the business, as well as part of the executive leadership team to help pull about 12 points of operating cost out of the business. For 3 years, I lived on an airplane. We built a fantastic growth story. We built Lehman Brothers India. We did all of the work for Allianz Group directly out of their holding corp in Germany. All their businesses ex-Asia. So Allianz UK, PIMCO, Fireman's Fund, Dresdner Bank. And then we took the business public and then we sold it within 3 years to our largest client, exchanging out of the UK. By that point, I was in my early 30s. I had no personal life to speak of, and so I chose to leave the company, and instead I joined a firm called Vernon Capital. I joined there because my lead investor from SoftBank ended up becoming the number two at Vernon. Vernon was about a $3 billion emerging markets focused investment firm. We were go anywhere capital. We could invest in publics, privates, pipes, greenfield real estate, anything that we thought could make money. The firm was started by a gentleman named Arshad Zakaria, who ran about 2/3 of Merrill Lynch, and Tom Patrick, who was the vice chair of Merrill Lynch and who was the CFO also in the 80s and the 90s. After about 2 years at Vernon, I met a Manitoban Icelander who happened to be living in Calgary, Alberta. And so I moved out west after 2 years of dating long distance. I moved out west to make an honest man of him. And so here I was all of a sudden in Calgary. I knew nobody. I didn't have a single introduction into the society, into the community of Calgary. So I started reaching out to people. I started asking them about their businesses, their community, and telling them about myself. And what happened was incredible. Every person I met introduced me to 5 more people who introduced me to 5 more. No one cared what color skin I had, what gender I was, who I loved at home, what language I spoke, who I prayed to. All they cared about was what skills did I bring? What could I do to help their business? It was a true meritocracy at the time, and it showed the power of economic strength and access in a community to be a rising tide that lifts all, including new community members or those less privileged. After getting to know the community a little bit, I decided that I wanted to start an investment firm focused on energy. I didn't know anything about energy at the time. All I knew about energy was it was a positive expected value hedge on the emerging markets. But this was the primary sector of Calgary. But as a woman, as a brown woman, I was not part of the insider club in Calgary. So I partnered with a gentleman who was. A gentleman who had been a CEO in town for over 3 decades, who had built one of the financial services firms in Calgary. And together we found shared purpose, shared vision to build our community, to build our city, and to help accelerate our energy sector. I built a blueprint to get to about $1 billion in assets in 5 years. We did it in 4. For the next almost close to a decade, I ran that investment firm. We took a business public. We bought and sold a number of assets. And then in 2017, I started getting deeply interested in sustainability. And so I pivoted again. I wanted to invest in renewable energy. And so I started investing in renewable energy. All my assets in renewable energy were just taken public in an organization called Green Impact Partners. The Royal Bank of Canada led that deal, and they put about $100 million on our balance sheet. And I'm only telling you this so that you know when I tell you my why and what I'm doing, you understand why I changed my entire life. I pivoted to do what I'm doing today, how important this is for me. You now know my professional story. I've been very blessed and very lucky, and I've been helped by many people to become financially successful. But I'm now going to tell you my personal story. So I come from poverty. I come from true rural poverty. My father he grew up in a farming family that was completely illiterate. His mother basically asked him to study and made him, it wasn't even an ask, it was a requirement, asked him to study by candlelight while he was growing up because she understood the power of education to change the trajectory of his life. When it was time for him to go to high school, there was no high school in their village. So my grandmother, his mother, begged for my dad to get a spot at a high school that was a few days away. He got in because he was smart, he was capable, he worked hard, and they let him sleep on the floor because he had no money to pay the tuition. So he was a charity student. But he had no money for food. And so another student who had a bursary for 2 meals a day shared one of those meals with my dad. So for the next 4 years, they each had 1 meal a day. My dad graduated at the top of his class, but where all the smart students went into engineering, he didn't have the $3 for the engineering entrance exam. $3. So instead he went into mathematics, which required no fee to take the test, the entrance exam test. He got a scholarship to university. He was helped by so many people along the way. He went to the University of Oklahoma for his master's. He did his PhD in mathematics at the University of Waterloo, and he's now a mathematician today in New York State. He's a pure theoretical mathematician. Nothing he does will have any practical value for at least 50 years, but he's built a life. He is the American dream. He sent three children to MIT, and he raised a family of 5, including paying for college tuition, buying a home, savings, for the most part on a salary of $19,000 a year. He used to make my mom save $10 out of the daily or the monthly household budget, the bi-weekly household budget, so every paycheck, so that he could invest it, not because he knew what he was doing, but because a friend who he trusted, who engaged him into the local community, told him he should. So he put this $10 a paycheck into an investment fund run by TIAA-CREF, which manages teachers' retirement savings. This is $10 a paycheck. This is $20 a month. This is $240 a year. He saved that. This totals up to about $140,000 saved over his lifetime. But by investing it, today it's over $2 million. He's paid off his house. He has sent 3 kids to an expensive university because he got exposure to financial services and access to credit and capital at an early stage. He changed the trajectory of not just his life, but all of ours and so many hundreds of people more in our families and communities. So because of that, I've lived my life because of 3 core values. Number 1, education changes the trajectory of people's lives. And so I express that by serving as the chair of the University of Calgary. We're about a 40,000 member student, staff, and professors university in Calgary. I also do a lot of work with the Loran Foundation, which, like Rotary, cares about civic mindedness, building community leaders, connecting into the community. My second core value, helping the world's most vulnerable. Why? Because my family was helped. This is how I am standing here in front of you today versus having been married off at the age of 14 and working in a farm, which is what happened to many of my cousins. So I am all UNICEF all the time. I have served on the board of UNICEF for 5 years. I have led the Women's Philanthropic Giving for UNICEF in multiple ways as a member of the UNICEF's 25th team in Women Unlimited. And my third core value is accelerating marginalized communities. Why does this matter? It matters because I think we all know intellectually and in our hearts that it is better to be part of a united society, a just society, where we all have access to the same opportunities. But we don't today. And part of the reason why we don't have access to the same is because of intergenerational issues that happen. We see this much of a person's life. We don't know where they came from, what happened in their homes, what their parents are like, what were the communities that they grew up in. We don't know the world that they live in today. And so if you take a step back and you look at this, I looked at this, and for me, my turning point was last year as the world was burning, as we saw Black Lives Matter happening, as we were living through COVID. And ESG Financial was born out of a deep emotional reaction to the systemic inequalities that face us in this world today. COVID ripped back the blanket on these deep systemic inequalities. It showed us that we are all connected. It showed us that there's no longer one of us. It must be all of us supporting all of us. As I was looking and I was watching what was happening in the world, I got angry. And I'm not somebody who gets angry. I was sharing this with some of the Invest Milwaukee committee members last night. I'm somebody who puts their head down and works and builds businesses and keeps on going. But last year, as we were watching what happened, there was also a moment of truth that came out. And that moment of truth is that we are in a deep cultural awakening right now, where one of the most exciting things is happening, where people are changing their actions, their behaviors, they're raising their votes, they're using their wallets to align with their values. And doing good is no longer the domain of charities alone. It is now incumbent upon every single one of us, every single corporation in America, every single small business, and every single individual. ESG is now at the forefront of what corporations are talking about. 50% of shareholder proxy voting last year was in support of ESG resolutions by the top fund families, top 50 fund families globally. What does this mean? It means that understanding stakeholders, supporting community, building a more sustainable world, it's no longer something we do on the side as philanthropy or nonprofits. It's something that we must do together, also from a business perspective. The reason we chose to start with financial services is because there are 55 million unbanked and underbanked Americans today. And underbanked is really interesting. It's not just racialized, it's also gender-based. If you are a woman, you tend to save money, but you don't tend to invest it. So with a 10-year treasury less than 2%, you basically are creating one of the biggest, over the next decade, one of the biggest gender-based wealth gaps, because we save money and we put it into a savings account versus investing it over time and compounding it. And so as we look at the importance of financial services, for us, it was about, to Teresa's point, what is that first building block? The first building block is to get access to a bank account for every single individual in North America today. And how do you do that? Financial literacy alone does not engage people. You have to do financial literacy plus engagement plus community support from trusted community members. When you pull that together, you can start changing behaviors. So where are we in our journey today? We closed our first round of capital. I personally put in $1 million to seed our business, and we were 3 times oversubscribed. We are getting supported by nonprofits all across North America. We have corporates who are opening bank accounts with us to commit to basically bank their values. Because what most people don't understand, because it's not part of our day-to-day, is that where you put your money matters. It matters to yourself to create options and wealth and security, and it matters to the world that you want to live in terms of what values are you aligning yourself with. When you partner with banks, they take that money and then they make loans. And those loans go into the community and out into the world. And they may or may not be aligned with values. And so that was our entire business proposition. We have been overwhelmed by the support that we have gotten. And we are so grateful to the Invest in Milwaukee community, the possibilities thinking that they have engaged in with us, the discussions that they have had with us on the actions that are here in the community itself and how we can help are so have been so incredibly inspiring. And so what I'll say in just summary before we move into any questions and answers that you may have is that I have been so lucky to be supported by so many people who have helped me by giving me a helping hand, supporting me in business, supporting me in my personal life. And then it's over time through the engagement with communities like yourselves, I have expanded my own personal relationship network and friends network. And you have all become, and people like you have become, friends, mentors, supporters, thought leaders, partners. You have helped me raise my voice, my hand, and help me amplify the voices of others to actually create change in the world. In the words of Bradley Whitford, take action. Every story you've ever connected with, every leader you've ever admired, every little thing that you've ever accomplished is a result of taking action. We have a choice to be either the passive victim of circumstance or the active hero of our own lives. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. So excited to be working with Rotary. And with that, I'd love to open the floor to any questions that you may have. Please. We are basing first out of Milwaukee, and we also have a base in Calgary, and we're just launching in Austin and New York City as well. I personally live in Calgary, Alberta. Teresa lives in Milwaukee. Please.
So you had mentioned a lot of, the oversubscription to the ideas. What challenges you face as far as starting this business?
Sure. I'm somebody who knows how to build pipelines of capital to create change. But what I wasn't sure of initially is whether people wanted that. And so it is one of the most scary things, and this is probably the biggest challenge that I have, to actually merge your for-profit and your not-for-profit values together and ask people to come alongside on the journey who share your mission, your purpose, your values, to build something that's greater than all of you. But what I have found is incredible. We have been supported by just almost every single person we meet. We've had about 100% uptake in any nonprofit that we've worked with. We have been from, how many of you have heard of, there's a dating app called Bumble? Yeah. So we've been adopted by the Bumble leadership team. So the women who founded Bumble, an incredible set of women, are now building out our brand and marketing because they believe in the mission and the impact of our business. We've been adopted by a company called, from a technology perspective, called Emphasis. It's a $5 billion Blackstone-backed, publicly listed business. And the CEO, I've known the CEO for 15 years. And one of the hardest things to do is when you know somebody from business context is to now share your personal mission in life to help create that more sustainable, inclusive, and just world for all. And yet, when I told him this, he immediately put at our benefit his entire financial institutions group. So our CIO and CTO is the person who is a CTO, was a CTO of Citibank. And when you think about what the power is of technology and data and why this matters, it's because when you look at, one of our missions is to break the FICO score. FICO basically is one of the biggest issues. It's the only and the best tool that we have today to understand and measure credit. But it is an evolving thing, and there are so many more data points that you can use to actually connect with people, and while they are live and in a behavior, to change their behavior. Because they may not have 7 years ago paid their rent on time or paid their mortgage bill or paid their utility bill. But if you can track them for the last 12 months and give them little tips on how they should do it, you can change their future behavior, and you can give them access to credit and capital and investment dollars, which then changes also the trajectory of their lives. So I'd probably say the hardest thing was putting my heart on my sleeve and saying, this is who I am. This is what I care about. Will you come with me, come alongside of me on the journey? And the response that we've had has been just overwhelming. Please. That is a great question. It has been, the question was, how is Calgary doing in the transition from an oil and gas town into what is next, into either zero carbon, etc. Losing your primary industry or having your primary industry being hit with thousands of job losses every day for 6 years is incredibly difficult. But we have, just like you have Rotary here, we have a great community of entrepreneurs and possibility thinkers and folks who are willing to invest for the betterment of our community. And I had an opportunity to serve on a group called OSIF, the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund, where we spent a lot of time. It's about $100 million fund that invests to try and help diversify our economy. And one of the things that we realized is we thought that we had a problem of jobs, of attracting people to our community to attract corporate headquarters to our community, to hire and to build jobs. What we actually realized after doing a study is that we had three problems. We had a problem of access to talent, so strong, technically trained personnel with skills that could start work immediately, the very next day. That was our first issue. Our second issue was an access to, it was a brand issue, where people thought of us as a redneck town that was an oil and gas city, and so they didn't want to come and live in our city. And our third, they thought that we weren't diverse, that we weren't building communities and interconnected, around interconnected values, which matters to this generation. And why should it matter to us? Because $28 billion is being transferred to millennials in this next decade. So Calgary this issue is in Calgary as well. And then our third issue was access to corporates. So corporates coming to town and building headquarters and hiring jobs. Once you know a framework of a problem, once you can look at it and go, okay, these are specific pieces. It's not everything. We can't solve all problems at the same time. But once you know what those problems are, you can start addressing it. And so for me, I took on the talent issue. And so that's when I joined as chair of the board of the University of Calgary. And so what we said is we're going to partner, and now multiple universities and colleges and community colleges in our province are doing the same thing. But what we said is we're going to integrate work-integrated learning with a degree. And so we've now made a metric of 80% of our programs must have work-integrated learning. So if we graduate an individual, they must have it. And then you start changing your brand. Then we partnered with a large technology firm. It just got announced. Emphasis is moving 1,000 jobs to Calgary. This just got announced last quarter. And they're doing it because now they know that there is a group of students that they can hire. And so just like the problems that you're focusing on and thinking about how do you create a stronger Milwaukee, the first question to solve, to Teresa's point, is before you solve number 3, which is to attract capital and attract investment, you have to go to the first floor. You have to ensure that you have a population that together feels safe and connected and part of a community. That's kind of floor number 1, which you guys are doing a great job at with the organizations that you support. Now, number 2 is how do you ensure financial access to every single member? Basic human rights, basic inalienable rights includes that access to those basic banking services. And then once you have it, the next question is housing. Housing has been the single biggest wealth creator in North America since World War II. Your home that you could acquire when you were in your 20s was your credit card that you could withdraw equity from when it was 18 years later, when it was time to send your first child to college. And then when you passed, it was that intergenerational wealth transfer that you gave to the next generation. Yet Black home ownership is 5% of what white home ownership is. What I learned last night from an Invest Milwaukee dinner is that there is a need for 32,000 affordable housing units here in Milwaukee. This is a problem that you are already bringing people together to solve. And this is one that we can actually step in and be part of the solution. Because this is that perfect intersection, which is what our business is. It's a social impact fintech. It's the perfect intersection between nonprofit and for-profit, where you can actually go, we need housing support. So how do we actually use philanthropy as first loss risk equity to help put people into homes and therefore reduce the risk of subprime so that we can actually then give them conforming 3% bank rate mortgages? So that is that third pillar. And then once they're that third floor, to use Teresa's analogy, and then once they're in homes, then all of a sudden they can think about investing, saving, educating their children, learning about financial literacy in a much bigger way, not worrying about being evicted or the roof over their head. And now, as you're building these homes, that's when you start going after jobs and bringing people there, because a safe workforce, an integrated workforce, is a productive workforce. And then that's what people want to hire. Did I answer your question? Please. The question is, in any startup, thank you for the question. The question was, in any startup or starting a new venture, there are inherent risks. And so what are the risks that we looked at ESG Financial, and how did we solve them? So for us, on the retail, there's basically three trends that are coming together. Trend number one is this human call to action. Trend number two is the rise of digital banking. And then trend number three is basically adding in the humanity component of social impact into business. No profit without purpose. So we talked about the human call to action. Now let's talk about digital banking. Banking is fundamentally a commodity service with high switching costs. That's what it is. And so there has been a massive trend in the last 5 years for digital banking, which is taking that commodity service and doing it better, faster, cheaper with access to technology. This is now in existence. Tech is here. And the third piece is then now adding in social impact, which is aligning money with values. When we looked at this, one of the first risks that we looked at, there's two pieces. When you are a fiduciary of capital, and I have run a regulated business for a decade as an investment firm, but when you're a fiduciary of capital, you have to provide security around everything you're doing. So instead of actually hiring all of our own engineers and software designers and tech, what we did is we partnered with a $5 billion financial services technology firm that serves the top 10 global banks and multiple fintechs all across the world today, because that deals with any issue of security and technology, because you are relying on backbone infrastructure that already exists. The second thing is, as you think about it, is at what step do you want to step into? McKinsey did this study where they found that if you care about the environment or climate, you are 27 times more impactful than being a vegan your entire life and never flying on an airplane by just moving your capital to align with your values. And so the question then became, from a risk perspective, is how do you manage that? The reason we chose to start with banking versus with investing is because banking is the gateway to access everything else. And with banking, we have the FDIC, which ensures every single deposit that somebody puts in your institution. And so those are the risks that we saw, and that's how we address them. Did I answer your question? Okay, thank you. Please.
Do you think that there's any give up that the investor has to make in terms of return and timing on the return as compared to what we call normal investment?
So there's an entire category around impact investing, which is trying to just focus on sustainable industries or social impact industries where they are earning a rate of return. What I would say is at what point that you enter into the investment curve is what can actually change and drive what return you get. So if you are a pure for-profit investor, then you would stay away from pure philanthropic giving. So you would not go into more community-oriented services. You would leave that to philanthropy. There is a huge trend that is happening right now, which is basically the intersection of for-profit and nonprofit. Philanthropy has traditionally always been a minus 100% return. When I give money to UNICEF, I expect a minus 100% financial return, but I expect a positive social impact. I expect X number of 400 million children around the world to get vaccinated every year against disease. So I look for social impact. Traditional finance or traditional investing is all about investing to get a positive return. So If I am in housing, I'm looking for, depending on where I'm looking at a cap rate of 3 to 7%, depending on my geography. If I'm investing in senior secured credit as a bank, I'm looking at 3 to 4% return unlevered. If I'm looking at more private equity, I'm looking at 15% to 20%, cash on cash yields or ROI. And so there is a space at the intersection between those two where you can choose what you want to do. If you are a fiduciary, if this is money that you are investing, you can just choose to align or invest in businesses that share a mission. We are a for-profit business, but our mission is to build a more sustainable and radically inclusive and just world for all. And so you can still achieve that and make money at the returns that you want to. Or you can go at the intersection of impact investing where you're also looking for direct social gain. So maybe you are willing to give up a rate of return. Here it's more of a foundation or a pension where you're looking at different type of stakeholder returns where you have to protect your capital. Here, an easy one is to take your fixed income allocation. I serve on about $3 billion of investment committees in Calgary for foundation and endowment dollars. So we've spent a lot of time talking about this exact same issue and where we as fiduciaries sit within the spectrum of what we can invest in. And here, if you're a foundation, you can look at building a more sustainable world by supporting residential solar loans, which give you a yield of 3 to 4%, or UCC registered, and have less than a 0.2 default rate. And so you can still do that, and that could take care of a fixed income allocation. So there's a whole spectrum, just like there is if you were just looking at the best investment choices. It's just looking at exactly the same thing, the best investment choices, but with a lens that you choose not to support industries that may be supporting values that you may not be aligned with, i.e. not supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion at the boardroom table or at the leadership table, not supporting the scalability of sustainable industry, not supporting the rise of a more integrated workforce. So it's more about just using that as a lens to filter the investments that you go into. Affordable housing, it's a great one. So please, did that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
I'm interested if you have a strategy for embracing blockchain and cryptocurrency technologies within the banking industry.
The question was, do we have a strategy for embracing blockchain and cryptocurrency technologies in banking? This is a top of the agenda for anybody actually for most people who read the paper today. And so one of our technology leaders is the head of blockchain is the blockchain leader for all of Emphasis. So today, what blockchain is, just for those who may not know, is it's basically just a record. It's a record of all transactions that is immutable. And it is, because it is stored on multiple servers, that record can never be changed. And so you can't lose a file, you can't lose an insurance claim, you can't lose anything. And because that record is digital, you actually can execute on transactions seamlessly and cost effectively behind it. So the way I would answer that question is it is a tool. It is a tool that you use when it makes sense to use that tool. And so we're absolutely looking at it, but for blockchain, it is absolutely a tool that you use when you want to do it and when you want to do things cheaper, better, faster, again, in a certain way. But day one, it also is a massive consumer of power. And so if it's a massive consumer of power, its cost overall also is higher. And when our entire thesis is this one for one, it's giving away banking services because we are profitable on our lending book and our technology on the back end. It's about making this as low cost and as efficient as possible. So it is getting there. It is a tool in our toolkit. And then just to answer a question on cryptocurrency, this is a really interesting thing. It is a toy in the United States. That's what it is. In the United States, it's fun and it's a toy. But in places like Venezuela, where you have, or Argentina, where you have hyperinflation, where $1 today is worth 10 cents tomorrow, and you cannot buy bread, it is the only tool to store value and therefore to be able to live a life. So it is something that everybody's looking at. It is something that many people want. It is not a basis of our business in any way, shape, or form. It's just, again, a tool and a product within the toolkit. So did that? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Please.
You go to the Rotary of Calgary. You go to the Rotary. Rodeo.
Abso-freaking-lutely. Rodeo. So Calgary has the large. You asked. That's the question you asked me. Do I go to the rodeo? Yeah. Have I gone to the rodeo in Calgary? Calgary has, for those of you who don't know it, the greatest outdoor show on earth. Like, you guys have Summerfest, which is incredible. We have the rodeo. So for 10, it's Burning Man for cowboys. For 10 days, our city shuts down, and it is just an absolute. It is amazing. 10 years ago, when I first went to Calgary, I was actually able to say, yes, this is my very first rodeo. It's an incredible, it's an incredible event, and I would love to host anybody who wants to come. Thank you all so very much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Geeta, for coming to our club. Your story is very impactful, very inspirational, and it sounds like your mission and part of Rotary's goal of connecting people and resources for a common good are going to align very well. And I think we're excited with the Invest in Milwaukee Committee and Rotary and you to really work together and create some great opportunities for the city. So thank you. In honor of leaders like you coming and speaking to our club, we are going to make a donation in your name to the YWCA, whose mission is eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. Thank you. Please join us next week. We have Peggy Williams-Smith, President and CEO at Visit Milwaukee, speaking to the club. One last quick announcement before we adjourn. The next Beer Connector is meeting at Furch's Craft House in Wauwatosa on Tuesday, August 24th at 5:30 p.m. If you're interested, please reach out to them over their Milwaukee Rotary Beer Connector Facebook group or contact the office. Let's go out and do some good in the world. This meeting is adjourned.